Just a little disclaimer before the video begins. I'm not telling you guys to pay attention to the entire game, okay? Because every league game is going to be different from the other. However, the first 10 minutes of every single league game are most likely going to be very, very similar. And they all have these small telltale signs, which I'm telling you guys about here. And that's what I'm showing, okay? I'm not asking you to pay attention to everything in the game, and this is only about the importance of the first 10 minutes and the small things that occur and tells a lot about the game and how they impact the game as a whole, okay? So yeah. Yo, Wackaflcka, I hope you guys are having a good morning, evening, night, whichever one fits. Shit like that. Today I'm going to talk about how to set yourself up for success, okay? It's about replicating your early game in the TLDR form, but as always, I'm going to go through the game, show a few examples. There's lots of these I can go in-depth about, however, I'm going to only go into in-depth about one, which I had today, that I noticed to be a problem, and I figured I should make a video about this because it's something I've wanted to do before. But yeah, let's get started. But first, I'm going to ask you a question here to add relevance to everything. Which part of the game are you most able to, or most likely able to replicate? Okay? Which part of the game can you replicate most accurately every game? The early game. So that's what this video is going to be about. I'm going to cover one aspect of the early game that you need to understand and have under control, and also tell you about the importance of this and why and how it functions in the game, okay? Because essentially the early game is the layer, the foundation, the groundwork of every single game, okay? And the early game, as opposed to everything else, is a lot more scripted. And what does that mean? That means that there's a few things you can understand or look for to gain a significant lead, or at least have the same outcome every single time, right? So with consistency, you'll also find success. So by paying attention to a few things here, knowing a few things during the early game will help you build a solid foundation, okay? Because how this works is, as the game progresses, right? Say a tower falls down, yeah? If you play that poorly, this next layer onto your game will be added tilted, right? And as everything you do wrong throughout the game, or every bad thing that happens, you'll keep laying on layers, right, that will edge out. And as these edge out, if you've played any tower games or something, you know what's going to happen here eventually, right? It's going to fall over. So the bigger and more steady foundation you have to the early game, the better you'll set yourself up for success every single game, right? So to give an example here, as one simple one can be knowing where the jungler starts, right? If you know he starts here, you know that he's most likely not going to go bot lane instantly. Or, as an example, when the waves come, knowing and paying attention to the level 2, knowing if they're going to level up or not, right? And being careful or acting on that is also another step of adding onto this. Because if you die on the level 2, what happens then, right? You have the game starts, and then they hit level 2, you die. The next layer gets added like this, right? So already then, part of the early game, the 10 minutes of the game, right? If we're going to box this in here and call this 10 minutes of the game, the next layer on your foundation is going to be uneven, right? Whereas you pay attention where the jungler starts, you get to your lane safely, and the lane starts, okay? Great. You pay attention to them getting level 2, or you get level 2 first. Okay, great. You don't die or you kill them. Another layer added successfully, right? And then next one, you pay attention to the jungler, knowing where they started, right? So you get to play the safe early game. You care for their cooldowns. So all of these things gets added up. But a lot of these are scripted and very easy to pay attention to. As an example, I mentioned the level 2, right? Where the jungler starts, when to recall, not overstaying, right? Those are all like simple things to pay attention to. And another thing that happens as the game progresses is that you'll start autopiloting more. So essentially, this video is about, do not autopilot for the first 10 minutes. Because you have no reason to, right? because it doesn't take a lot to pay attention to things here. It's basically the same thing every single game for the first 10 minutes, right? So you don't have to pay attention to a million different scenarios here. It's the same scenario every single time. So you can just check it, right? You check, are they getting level 2? Blah, blah, blah. Okay. We're low HP, recall, don't end, check, right? It's really basic. There's no objectives to contest, no Baron, right? You don't have to be in different lanes. It's the same thing every single game, so it's really easy to replicate. So by replicating success formula, you'll get a really solid foundation, okay? So I hope you understand that now. Because what I'm going to talk about is the first dragon, okay? That's one of the last layers, depending on when it gets taken, in the first 10-minute stage of layer foundation, right? In like the layer or like the ideas of inside this box, it's one of the final pieces, right? And what can happen with this here, if you lay this brick wrong, if you don't put it correctly in a dragon fight, the outcome, if it's you and you're part of the bot lane and the jungler, that's 3 people, right? If this goes wrong, because you're doing something wrong here, you will essentially give 3 kills potentially, and also the dragon, right? And that's going to have a huge shift here. Even if your other steps are really good, that is a part of the game that can add a really uneven foundation, right? So when you attempt to build on top of this next, the game is essentially going to be really unstable, right? That should be easy to understand. So by securing, the longer and bigger you can create this foundation or the layers and stack them correctly by following like simple ideas and thoughts, such as when or how or why you should contest the fight dragon or take it, okay? But as I said, it's one of the final pieces. I can cover like lots of these things here, but essentially the first step would be to check where the jungler is starting, or the one before that is checking if they're going to invade. Cover for that, right? Because if you die then, one of the bottom layers of your foundation, say you get invaded and you die, one of your first breaks, because the first one is obviously going to be there, but because the game started. This is champion select, right? And then the next one is the invade and caring for those things. So by checking or taking care of that, kind of prevent this from happening, because everything upon this after that's built will be not stacked properly in this analogy, right? So I hope you guys understand that now. And one of the things I do in particular, if I'm playing Twitch Jungle, people know this if you watch these videos, is I'll put an excessive amount of effort to get my team to stack on red, because that secures me the red buff, but it also secures that I don't die, I don't get invaded, and that's part of laying a solid foundation for myself so I can succeed in the game. Because if I lose my red buff, or I die or something, or they get control of our jungle, that's going to start the game off really bad, and especially on a champion like Twitch, that's going to be really awful, right? So it's about putting an excessive amount of effort or like attention to the start of the game, because you're not going to be tilted then by any previous things, right? You're not going to have died 10 times, being ganked by the jungler. It's like you don't have those kind of excuses to like look to, right? Like you should be able to focus to this. It takes 10 seconds to look where the jungler started or who came to lane last, right? And it takes just a few seconds of looking at the minions. Okay, first wave is dead. Are the first 3 melee about to die? No, yes. You look at that. It's easy, okay? Just don't autopilot and like fall out on this, because it's going to matter a lot, okay? And now, as I said, what I'm going to get to here is the dragon. Knowing how and why you can take the dragon early game is an important step to this, right? As an example, if you have the wave shoved into them, and they're here and they have a huge wave, that's a good clue that you can take the dragon, right? But if they have recalled previously 10 seconds before, and you go for the dragon then without recalling yourself, normally in the lane people will gather anything from 500 to 1k gold or something, and then come back to lane, right? And what is that? That's a long sword, perhaps a pickaxe, even a noon quiver, right? That's a lot of items. So if you, on your team, are about to take the first dragon, you know they recalled 10 seconds ago, and you start the dragon, That's bad, right? So checking on that, saying, okay, we shouldn't do dragon now. We should go back. Like take after, recall first, right? That it's just these ideas you need to have, okay? But in reverse, if you know you've recalled and have the items, and they haven't, and they're low HP or summoners are down, you should know that. You should look for the dragon and see if they're on it, or how they're doing, right? And that's what I'm going to show here today, because I had this game today, and we got killed by the Nocturne here, unfortunately. But I'm going to have both the visions on here for now, because it'll show clarity here. But I spot Nocturne here with half HP. Currently has 200 gold shot down, and that's huge, right? And then I start spam pinging, because I know he's going to go on dragon. And we will win this 100%. Take a look at Esro's items here, right? And then look at Nocturne. He hasn't recalled. He has the whip, and he has 350 gold, right? Or a longsword. So essentially, Estro has more items here, more damage. Twitch is trolling. I mean, we're not going to have this information, so basing this play on that isn't something I would do. I'm just going to solely base it on the information that I have, right? Nocturnes and Dragon, about there's 80% chance, right? So we should go there. And this is the first dragon, as I said. It's a really important layer to your like base or like game foundation, right? So I spam ping it, and Ezreal doesn't go. And any player here, especially someone like him in Diamond 1 Master something, they should know this. They should be there. The way it's even pressed into the tower, essentially it's a slow push out. Like he's not going to lose that much, and it's definitely going to be worth it, because as I said, we're talking a dragon here, 200 gold shutdown, plus the essential extra 300. And then considering Twitch and both Janna was very weak, there would potentially be another 2 kills, right? And we wouldn't lose anything if it didn't work, so we could just walk out again. As an example, Estro can just jump over here, right? So you need to pay attention to these things. And always think and see how have they recall before they're doing dragon, right? Or like if you know they're on dragon in a situation like this, you need to capitalize on it. You cannot just let it go. It's very early into the game. You have no reason to not pay attention or be zoned out already. Especially as a person as Estro here in this position. He shouldn't be tilted. He was doing great. I mean, he had a lot of kills. He didn't do great, but he had kills, right? It's like there's no excuse for him to not go here. Because as we see with this pathing, right? Most players in this situation would or should walk here, right? He would even arrive before me. And as we can see, Nocturne's half HP and no mana, right? I follow through with this play regardless, because I think it's a good play. And I don't care if he wants to join or not, because he clearly doesn't want to win in this sense, right? But that's obviously something to learn too. Because this is a mistake I do. I'm a very impatient player. This is one of my biggest mistakes. If I see the right play, I'll go for it, even if no one else is there. And it's kind of a question, is it actually a right play then if no one else is going? Or is it then a bad play, right? Because you can only control yourself. So essentially what I should have done here is just walk away. But any half-decent player should have been here. Because we can see us here in the mid lane. We know he's going to be there, most likely by himself, based on the information that we had. We knew that Janna and Twitch weren't going to be there. And we knew that he was half HP. Right, so these are things you should click onto and just capitalize on and do. Because you're checking your checkboxes here. Half HP, pathing towards dragon, no recall. Go check. There's no immediate threat here. Enemy is not contesting plates. Right, there's no gain here. It's a slow push out. So you're not going to lose that much even if you go. If the enemy was here shoving, that would be a different matter. Because then you would also be having the plates at risk, right? So that's something to think about too. Because if they're shoving here, they're going to take plates, but at the moment, right now, they're not gaining anything from here. Besides the slow push, which is going to net them a few minions. But that's worth it for this here, right? And that's basically it. Pay attention in the early game, try and replicate it. Don't miss out on these simple things, because you really have no excuse to miss out on them. Because you should see, okay, they're going to get level 2. Pull away, play safe. Make sure you lay another layer on your foundation straight. So it helps you build the rest of your game. And the more bricks you can lay on top of each other without missing them too hard, it's going to help you, right? But as I said, the game can split off into many directions based on what happens, right? If we got the dragon here, if this is win or good or bad, like there's so many different outcomes in the game, so it's hard to like say. Like the closer you are to the start, to the branch of the branch, right? There's going to be fewer branches, but the further out you get, the more branches there's going to be. So like the closer to the branch or the root of the thing or problem or whatever you want to call it, it's going to be easier to replicate or do the same, right? Or follow rather, because there's not that many things you need to look out for, as opposed to the very end where there's going to be 1,000 different outcomes. So to try and get to the start to the end game here in this one game, right? There's not going to be a lot of games that are the same. So that's the thing. Just focus on the start here. Make that solid. Just click onto the few things. Pay attention to it. As I said, it just takes 5 seconds to look which lane is pathing late. Then you know where the jungler is starting, most likely, right? Pay attention to the level 2 wave. Okay, great. Potentially care for invades before the jungler start, of course, right? Like these small things, it doesn't even have anything to do with CS. Like that's a whole different matter again. Because essentially, this matters a lot more. These like small things there. Because it's something if you can replicate every single game, then you're gonna have way more consistent games overall. And essentially, you're also gonna then end up winning more, right? So that's it. Hope you guys continue having a good morning, evening, night, whichever one fits. Shit like that. Take care. Peace. Bye. This has been Wackaflcka video. Yeah, shit like that. Peace.